Hi, and welcome back to A Case of Books. So last September, my first book came out in the US, and I was lucky enough to get to go and visit 6 states in America to visit schools and bookshops to talk about the Book Wanderers, which is what the book is called in America. So I thought, roughly a year later, with the third book having just come out in America and here in the UK, and particularly because none of us can travel much at the moment, I thought it would be a nice kind of point to look back at the tour and also give you a bit of a behind the scenes look at what it's like to be on an author tour. There are going to be quite a lot of shots of traveling and quite a lot of sort of sped up book signings, because that did take the majority of the tour, but I hope you enjoy. Here's my US tour from September last year. It started with an extremely early flight to New York. I was super excited. I've never been to New York before. Watched a bit of Aladdin on the plane, which I actually really enjoyed, and landed about lunchtime, and this was on a Friday. So from there I went straight to my hotel, had a shower, and to make sure I could meet everyone at my publisher, Philomel, which is part of Penguin, I then went immediately to the Penguin offices. And I'm not gonna lie, getting to go to the Penguin Random House offices in the middle of New York as an author was a real kind of bucket list pinch me moment. I'm so lucky with my American publisher and so many of my foreign publishers. When you sell foreign rights, you just kind of pass your story over to publishers. Often you don't even communicate with them directly, and you just hope that they care for it. And I've been so fortunate with so many of my foreign publishers, and Philomel in particular have been so generous and supportive, and I'm really very lucky to be with them. And you can see in the background of this clip, in the red dress, is my US editor Cheryl, who is absolutely fab. And here you can see the first of very, very many sped up signings. I was signing stock for people at Penguin and their families, and I got to meet the team there as well. And it's so lovely to actually meet in real life the people who are behind publishing my book. I didn't get a great deal of free time to myself on this trip, predictably, but the Penguin offices are super close to one corner of Central Park. So my first time in New York, I obviously had to take half an hour, the other half an hour I had free, to go and have a little bit of a look at Central Park. And it's such a cliche, but like, it's so beautiful, it's so lovely. And I felt like I was in a film, and it was a great stolen half an hour from the kind of mad tour schedule. That evening I had dinner with my editor Cheryl, which I didn't film, but I was back with Cheryl the next morning on Saturday, where we did a trip around some of the bookshops in New York. We started at the iconic Books of Wonder at their Uptown branch, and it's just such a gorgeous children's bookshop, and it was so exciting to visit. The booksellers were so lovely. I mean, the booksellers were lovely everywhere we visited. You can see in Cheryl's hands that we had brought some treats. We brought some pastries and cakes everywhere that we went, which I think went down quite well. So I signed some stock. I am doing this voiceover with horrible wind and rain outside, and it's wild seeing me wearing a sundress, but it was incredibly warm while I was in New York. So this is some of their rare book collection, which they have a lot of Oz books in particular. It's really just a beautiful shop that deserves its reputation. I, of course, bought a tote bag. I also saw some friends on the shelves, which is always nice. And then I'm afraid the next 2 bookshops, it's really sad. Both of these bookshops have since closed due to the coronavirus pandemic. So first of all, we visited the lovely Cozy Bank Street bookstore, which closed this summer. And then we headed to Brooklyn to the Stories Bookshop and Storytelling Lab, which is such a beautiful bookshop. So they're still operating online and running all sorts of amazing stuff online and doing workshops, but the actual bookshop is closed now. And just as we go into another lockdown here in the UK, I just want to say, please support your local independent bookshops and your local Waterstones as much as you are able to. These bricks and mortar stores, even if they're operating digitally at the moment, they won't be able to survive if we don't support them. So, please support as much as you're financially able local independent businesses and bricks and mortar bookshops. And then our final stop of the day was the Greenlight bookstore, also in Brooklyn, and also still very, very much open. This was another absolutely beautifully curated bookshop with more absolutely lovely, friendly booksellers. So I signed their stock, and then Cheryl very kindly indulged my tourist side and took me for a slice of pizza, which I got disproportionately excited about. It feels like a real kind of New York tourist thing to tick off the bucket list, and I am not above being a tourist. I then negotiated the subway by myself to get back to the hotel before having an evening to myself. Now, anyone who follows me on social media will know that I am a huge fan of immersive theatre, and so I could not go to New York without going to see Sleep No More, which is the only immersive theatre thus far I've left with fake blood on me, but it was really, truly excellent. Next day, Sunday, was a travelling day, so I kicked it off with a rather absurdly sized breakfast in my New York hotel room. And then it was off to the airport. I was a little bit gutted not to be able to spend more time in New York. As I said, I've never been before, and I absolutely loved the glimpse that I got of it. I was supposed to be going in March with one of my best friends, Katie, but of course that got cancelled due to the pandemic. But I can't wait to go back once it's safe to do so and to explore properly. And then a few hours later, I landed in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I got a cab to a lovely hotel. You can see all my stuff there and the ironing board. Had to do a lot of ironing dresses. Had another hotel meal and actually watched the Emmys, which was on that night. And then I was up bright and early for a pretty jam-packed day. This started first thing with breakfast with booksellers at the lovely Flyleaf Books in Chapel Hill in North Carolina. Gorgeous big bookshop. I feel like I'm such a broken record saying in every bookshop, and there are a lot to come about how nice everyone was, but I was overwhelmed with how nice and generous and supportive all of the booksellers and all of the schools were. It really made a very exhausting long week really special and lovely. And then it was off for my first school visit. Now, I do a lot of school visits in the UK and I really enjoy them, but I was really nervous about doing school visits in a different country and not really sure kind of if the rhythms would be the same. But again, all the schools were so warm and welcoming, just as varied as schools are here in terms of their style and their culture, but everyone was incredibly welcoming. Obviously, I don't have a great deal of footage from filming at the actual schools with children. Anything I have included, I did ask for permission. So first of all, we went to Sewell Elementary, which had its own mini farm. And then in the afternoon, after a quick sandwich lunch, went to Southern Pines Elementary, which was such a lovely school. And the event was supported by an incredible charity, which gets authors into schools, but also funds books being given to the students. And I've included this clip of one of the grades who were asked to stay behind because they were told that they were going to get a free copy of the Book Wanderers each.
That you got to stay when 4th grade did not is because every single one of you is getting a free copy of it.
Obviously that was a pretty amazing experience and really moving. And part of the reason that charity works so well is because it is supported by the Country Bookshop, which is their local independent bookshop. And Angie, who runs it, was doing the book sales, and we went to stop in at her gorgeous store after we did the event. Then we had a bit of a drive, and here's some more driving footage because North Carolina is really, really beautiful. It was about an hour's drive out to Farrington, which is a gorgeous tiny village where we visited McIntyre's Books. Such a beautiful bookshop, and I fully stole elements of this when I invented a new bookshop for Pages & Co. 3. If you've read the Map of Stories, there's a bookshop where there's a wrapping room, and that is 100% stolen. I say stolen, borrowed from McIntyre's Books, and I have thanked them in the acknowledgements. You can just see a glimpse there. And as you can see, it really is a particularly lovely bookshop. It is so beautifully designed. The booksellers are so lovely, and everything is just, it's very Pages & Co-y. They even have a White Rabbit-esque sculpture outside, which I obviously had to have a nice cheesy photo by. We then went to a cafe that is right next to the bookshop in this little village and had some tea. And then after that, I was taken to the airport. I should say that each day when I was kind of doing a state a day, I was looked after by one of the Penguin sales rep. And in North Carolina, it was this lovely woman called Donnie. You'll have seen her crop up in a couple of the clips. And I was just looked after so incredibly well the whole time. Another quick glimpse of beautiful North Carolina as I was dropped off at the airport, where I got a flight to Washington, D.C., which is the only place of all the places I visited that I have been to before. I was here in 2018 when my boyfriend was in a play here, and I visited the Library of Congress, which was a big inspiration for the third book, which you will know if you have read it. So I stayed in a really lovely hotel in DC before another very early start. I am not a morning person, and this schedule was pretty brutal. I was landing in each new state about 11 p.m. each day and getting up, being picked up about 7 a.m. for a breakfast. But they were all lovely breakfasts. This one was with child's play, toys and books. So we had a lovely spread in their bookshop before going to St. Patrick's Episcopal for my first school visit of the day. You can see just quickly on the left there, the left of those two women is Maggie, who was the sales rep who looked after me brilliantly all day in DC. And then after that school visit, we popped into the iconic Politics and Prose, which is a very famous bookshop in DC. Saw Catherine Doyle, one of my best friend's books, which was very nice to see, and then I signed their stock for them. Then we had lunch in a classic American diner. I took a picture, which I apparently have not turned around, sorry. And then I was off to the next school visit, which was at Glebe Elementary. The librarian here was particularly wonderful and engaged. These are all the books that had been pre-ordered by children. They'd done such a good job of letting the kids know what was happening. So I signed all the books and personalised them before the event, which was actually one of the biggest I did on this tour. They ranged from about 80 kids, I think was the smallest, to around 300 at this school, which I'm glad this was not the first one I had to do. We then went to One More Page Books, technically in Virginia at this point, which was a super lovely little bookshop with a photo of Obama on the wall from when he visited. You can just kind of see it there. They were super fun here. We went and had some tea at a cafe over the road, talked a lot about immersive theatre and books, and it was a really lovely kind of last thing to do in DC. Here's some more driving footage. I must admit, as a British person in America, I just loved getting to drive around kind of more suburbs and little different bits of neighbourhoods of America that you kind of don't get to see if you're visiting somewhere on holiday. So prepare yourself. This is not the last clip of me driving down a road in America. And I said that was the last thing. That was the last official thing that we did. But we actually stopped off at another bookshop very, very quickly before I went to get my flight. And that was the delightfully named Hooray for Books, complete with exclamation mark. This is a lovely bookshop on the outskirts of DC, and they did the book sales for one of the school visits, so it was really nice to get to go and see the store before I went to the airport. Then it was back, another flight, landed in Minnesota at about 10:30 p.m. And you can really tell the points of this tour that I was absolutely exhausted because there's just no record of what I was doing. But bright and early in the morning, beautiful day, visiting the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul's. And what do you know? Here's some more footage of me driving down streets in the suburbs of American cities. And the first place we went for breakfast was the lovely Red Balloon bookshop in St. Paul's. And from there, we went on to the Heritage East End School, which was the loveliest place. Like, they gave me this like welcome basket with snacks, and I had a team of kind of like student ambassadors to look after me, which you can see in that photo, which I stole from the school librarian's Instagram at the time. I say stole, as in I asked her if I could use it. And then we were on the way to Wild Rumpus. Now, I obviously don't have favourite bookstores that I visited. Everywhere was amazing, but Wild Rumpus is a pretty special place, and you will see why. I'm just going to include most of the filming I did here just so you can look around. So this is Wild Rumpus of me struggling to open the door and hold a camera at the same time. And it is the most creative, imaginative children's bookshop. I think this looks like normal, cool but normal, but you can see there's a crack in the ceiling, and I don't know if you can make it out. That's an upside down canoe. There are all sorts of just gorgeous details. There is a man disappearing up into the ceiling on a ladder. There's the crack in the ceiling. This isn't, you can tell I'm tired. Some of this is not very good. There are also many pets. This is an owl. I'm like pretty sure that was an owl. There are also cats. Look how lovely the cats are. And there are also bugs and spiders, but I hate spiders, so I didn't even go anywhere near them, let alone film them. I'm just gonna stick with the cats. And we went for lunch at a restaurant near the bookshop where we had this coconut cake that I swear I still dream about. If any Americans watching this can point me in the direction of a recipe that you think will make something like this, please let me know. From there, we went to Visitation School, which is a rather fancy school, who gave me a beautiful branded water bottle that I still use today. It keeps water lovely and cold. Also, this was the school of a, to me, iconic presentation welcoming me to Minnesota, and I have put the whole thing in for you to enjoy.
Welcome to Minnesota, Anna James. Anna James, Wednesday, September 25th at 2. We have learned that this is your first time to Minnesota. Thank you for coming. Thank you for crossing the Atlantic Ocean from London to visit us today. We thought it would be fun to compare London and Minnesota. You have the Beatles and Adele. We have Prince and Bob Dylan. You have football. We have football. You have Daniel Radcliffe. We have Judy Garland of Wizard of Oz. You have Big Ben. We have Mall of America. You have Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. We have Because of Winn-Dixie by Kate DiCamillo. You have William Shakespeare. We have Charles Schultz. You have London Fair. We have Minnesota State Fair. You have St. Paul Cathedral. We have St. Paul, Minnesota. You like writing books, we like reading your books. The Book Wanderers.
I truly don't think that I have had a better or more factually dubious welcome to a school ever. I loved it so much. Then our last stop of the day was Moon Palace Books, and I think you can probably just see in this clip any second, you can see the lovely Jill who looked after me the whole day in Minnesota. Moon Palace is a great, super characterful bookshop with an amazing vegan cafe, lots of secondhand books, a really, really great store and a really nice place to finish off the day. Then it was back to the airport. I had a weird mix of really, really excellent food and a lot of airport food on this trip. But I landed in Denver, I think it was about 9:30 p.m. I went straight to the hotel and went basically straight to sleep. And then I had just over a day in Denver. I really loved Denver, although it's at a very high altitude and I was already by this point extremely jet lagged and it made me feel weird all day, but I really, really loved the city. So first port of call was the gorgeous Second Star to the Right bookshop, and I was with Jill today, different Jill from yesterday's Jill, but equally lovely. So we went there first thing where I signed their stock for them and pre-signed some books for some of the school visits as well, and then we had breakfast with some of the booksellers at a cafe next door. And then we went to the first school visit of the day, which was the Most Precious Blood School. The kids who were really lovely, as was their librarian, who's absolutely brilliant. It's a bit of a weird visit because there was an active shooter drill scheduled for the morning, which we got permission to miss, but we still heard the alarm. And the whole school was really calm about it. I found it quite distressing. It's obviously a very different experience for me. But just to reiterate as well how great the school was at both dealing with that and just generally. Then it was on to Tattered Cover Bookstore in Denver. Now this is another store that I absolutely have borrowed some inspiration from, and if you've read Tilly and the Map of Stories, you will know immediately. This is a bookstore that is in a converted theatre, and in book 3 there is a bookstore called Shakespeare's Sisters that is in a converted theatre, which I borrowed from this because it's just so beautiful. So thank you to Tattered Cover, who are also thanked in the acknowledgements for letting me kind of take inspiration from your gorgeous store. So it signed stock here as well, and then we had a really lovely lunch at the cafe that's kind of joined on to the bookstore, and then it was on to the penultimate school visit of the tour at the lovely Centennial Elementary. And we finished the official part of the day at Book Bar, which is a bookshop and wine bar, which made it a really nice place to finish the day. So we stopped off here, did the signing stock, and then we just got to relax with the booksellers there. They have a gorgeous little kind of patio area, and we had some food and some of their wine, and it was just a really, really lovely, slightly more relaxed way to end the day. Then I was dropped off back in the middle of Denver at my hotel, and one of the lovely booksellers, Connor, that I had met, he and his fiance Evan took me out for a drink, which was really nice. And then the next morning I had a lovely school visit at Timberline Elementary, but this blurry photo is the whole record of that morning, because I'm afraid at this point this is when jet lag just really took over. I was in my 5th time zone in 7 days, and I was just exhausted at this point. There is not a great deal of footage to come from the last day and a half. But after the school visit, I was dropped off at the airport and I got my last internal flight to Seattle. So I landed there kind of late afternoon and went straight to my hotel for a quick shower before I went out for a bookseller's dinner. So in Seattle, instead of going around to individual bookshops and doing school visits, I had one dinner with all the booksellers, not all of them, but a lot of the booksellers, independent booksellers in Seattle. And it was a really lovely way to round off the tour. It was an absolutely gorgeous dinner that was organised by Colleen, who was the sales rep for Penguin, not the person in this picture. That is a lovely bookseller who'd made a pin badge out of one of the quotes for the books. And then I was home. I stayed in Seattle that night and then had a super early flight in the morning and I flew back to Heathrow. It was honestly one of the most special experiences I have had as an author. I feel incredibly fortunate and privileged to be able to go and do something like this. I'm aware that this isn't something that everyone gets to do. Penguin was so brilliant. The tour was so incredibly organised by my publicist at that point, Lindsay. Everything went so smoothly. It was exhausting. I don't think I've ever been tired like I was at the end of this week, but everything went so smoothly. Everyone I met was so generous with their time, so supportive of the books, and it was just a really special experience that I'm incredibly grateful to have had. And you know, looking back now when we can't travel, it's even more special to look back at it. What an incredible thing to being able to do. So thank you to every single person who had anything to do with it and everyone that I met, and I hope that in the future I get to visit again. I hope you've enjoyed watching this and it's kind of given you maybe some insight in what it's like to do a tour like this. If you have any questions, let me know and I can either answer them in the comments or I can make another video. I've had a few people asking for some more kind of authory videos, so I'll maybe do an author related Q&A. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you relatively soon.